microphone is on. Okay. Liam is a pro at being able to eliminate the pops. So if you hear popping, I'll give him one of these or something. We're good. I don't hear popping right now. All right, you ready? You may stream, sir, and record if you want. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Everybody here knows that we are about to start Shabbat. And even though the sun hasn't gone down, we are starting Shabbat. And as soon as we light those candles and say that they're Shabbat candles, we officially can start Shabbat, even if it's a little bit early. That's the way life works in the Jewish lane. But I don't know if everybody knows that today was a holiday that we're ending when we start Shabbat. Did you know it was a holiday? You know what holiday it is? So I feel extremely responsible for the fact that you don't know when there are fun holidays on the calendar. I'm going to fix this. The holiday that's ending today, so you know we're in the middle of the Omer. So the Omer is, we count from Passover until Shavuot, 7 times 7 weeks. So do you know what day we are starting with today for the Omer? Tonight? Tonight we'll be doing 34. But the 33rd day of the Omer is also known as Lag BaOmer. And Lag BaOmer is a special day. Up until now, for the whole period of the Omer, it's as if we are in mourning. And if you're here on the first week that we were doing Omer, I explained that we're in mourning for the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva who died from a plague. And it was said that they were not being nice to each other. So when you're a student in a yeshiva type setting, you're supposed to argue with each other. And the arguing is things like, well, this says, that you're not supposed to boil the kid in the mother's milk. Does that mean I'm never allowed to have milk with meat? Or does that mean, what about chicken? And you get to have those kinds of arguments. And that's fine. And when you do that, you're supposed to do it in a way that's respectful to each other. You're supposed to build on knowledge. You're coming from this saying, I really think this is what it is, because, look, it says this over here. And you're allowed to disagree with each other. It's encouraged, because sometimes that's the only way to gain knowledge, is by discussing it out. But apparently these students were not being respectful to each other while they were disagreeing. And 24,000 students were killed in the plague. So part that I forget is that 5 students did not die. Out of all of his students, 5 didn't die. And one of them was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And he was one of the founders of what we understand as Jewish mysticism. And one of the reasons, so there's a tradition that in Israel and in America and places, but all over Israel, starting after Passover, kids start collecting little pieces of wood and things to make bonfires. And they make bonfires in Israel on Lag BaOmer. And it is a day when you get to suspend mourning. So some of the things that you do for mourning is you don't cut your hair. There's no celebrations. You won't see weddings and things during the Omer period. But on Lag BaOmer, not only can you cut your hair, but especially Hasidic groups, but it doesn't have to be Hasidic groups, but some groups, when a boy is 3 years old, that's when they get their first haircut, is on Lag BaOmer. We had one person in our community in the last 30 years that I know of who did that, who had their haircut when they turned 3. And that was Alexander Murov. His hair was really lovely and long up until then. But, and it's back again. But it's a day of, you go from this kind of very long, prolonged period of mourning to a really wonderful, joyous day. And that's wonderful, except this year that's not what happened. It did. There were lots of people celebrating, but there are many people, especially a lot of Hasidic sects, who get together on the place where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai had lived, and where he was buried. He lived in a cave, by the way. That's how he survived parts of the plague. And they go to this cave, and they make their bonfires there, and they celebrate there. And even the non-religious Jews sometimes go there and celebrate because they think of it not as enjoying the mystical tradition, but for another one, for Bar Kokhba rebellions, and that's another story I was going to talk about in a moment. But I hope that you heard what happened yesterday. So 10,000 people were allowed to come to this. They didn't get to do it last year. And they had authorization for 10,000 people. Israel has been wonderful about their vaccine rollout. Almost everybody in the country has already had their vaccines. And 10,000 people didn't show up. 100,000 people showed up. And some of the places that they have to get to come to this cave were very narrow. And there was a kind of a stampede. And there were 45 people killed, trampled, from young children to elderly. 150 more people at least were injured. And it is one of the worst tragedies that wasn't a bombing and intentionally trying to hurt people that has ever happened. And so I have mixed feelings. I wanted to share with you that you realize that I often say that at every joyous occasion we also think about the sad things that happen, where we have a joyous occasion and we think about the people who are no longer with us. But at sad occasions we also get to think about the joyous times that we had with those people. But I had a couple of quotes for you that there's a Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, who is known as Rabbi Chida. He had a quote that I wanted to share with you. He said, remember that Lag BaOmer, which Lag is Lamed Gimel. Lamed is 30 and Gimel is 3, so Lag BaOmer is 33. So he said, Lag BaOmer is the celebration of never becoming hopeless or despondent. It's a day of tenacity, resilience, and commitment to carry on our magnificent heritage and sacred mission in the world. And this is what I thought was helpful and why I'm giving this to you now. He said, everybody's celebrating with bonfires all throughout Israel, but eventually the bonfires go out and life goes on after that. And he said, just as the bonfires will burn out and Lag BaOmer will come to an end, in this year it will be time to light Shabbat candles, and we will keep a fire burning. And in this case, a fire burning is a symbol of hope. It's a symbol of the spirit that doesn't get put out. Someone said this week that they had heard that all of these bonfires were like yahrzeit candles, and I had never heard that before. I always thought that it was kind of joyous things, but we found some things that showed that it was connected potentially to mourning, but I just want to tell you that this year has been a year filled with that, filled with hope and despair. And I love when we have a moment where we watch transitioning from one sad thing into the possibility of hope. It doesn't mean that we can't continue to be sad. Shabbat is always a day when we're supposed to suspend our mourning practice, our public mourning. But inside you can still feel sad. But it's been a horrible thing. Last week we had a Torah portion. We had a double portion. One was called Acharei Mot, which means after the death. Nadav and Avihu were Aaron's sons, and if you read that story, and that happened many weeks ago, if you read that story, it feels like they were very enthusiastic and they brought offerings. The tabernacle had finally been finished. They finally got to dedicate it. They finally got to bring things. And after they finished the dedication ceremony, they brought an additional offering of this incense. They weren't supposed to bring it, and they got consumed. And we learned that Aaron's reaction was just silence. And people weren't supposed to mourn. They were supposed to be silent. So at joyous times, we also find sad times. And I do feel like this has been kind of a symbolic of this whole year. But I would like us to take the moment when we go over and light the candles to recognize that Shabbat begins. And Shabbat is a time when we get to add an extra soul, a soul that allows us to be joyful. And I hope that you take this opportunity to remember, but to continue to be joyful as we move on. So before I get over to the candles, I encourage everybody to take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. One of the words for soul is a neshama, which also means breath or spirit. Take another breath. Let it out slowly. I'm so glad that I can do that. And I encourage us now to turn to page 82, and please rise for the blessing of the candles. They're happy and they're dancing. Do you know why we have two, by the way? Why it becomes a tradition to do two? In the Decalogue, which we're going to hear in a few weeks when the confirmation class reads it, it says there's two versions of the Decalogue. One of them says, keep Shabbat, and another version says, remember Shabbat. So, and to remind us that there's two things we're supposed to do and not do lots of things we're not supposed to do. We have two. These lights are only flickering flames, yet flames illumine our uncertain steps. Flames remind us of Sabbaths long past and of their beauty that delighted our hearts. May they inspire us to work for the great Sabbath of peace. I'm going to do it in Hebrew. You can read the English. Brachi Baruch Shemoy, Brachi Baruch Shemoy, Brachi Baruch Shemoy. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. You may be seated. Did you hear the news that there's a camera out in space that is looking at the inside of the death of a star, and it's the most dense thing that exists in the universe? And I think about that when I think about we have power right now to bless a little light and turn it into a very powerful thing. We will continue on page 84 as we welcome the angels that accompany us on Shabbat. Very helpful angels, angels of peace.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Hasharet, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachi Hamlachim HaKadosh, Baruch Hu. Bolechem l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech, Malkei Hamlachim HaKadosh, Baruch Hu. Baruchuni l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachi Hamlachim HaKadosh, Baruch Hu. Tzitchem l'shalom, Malachi Hashalom, Malachi Elyon, Mi Melech, Malkei Hamlachim HaKadosh, Baruch Hu.
The synagogue is the sanctuary of Israel. Born of our longing for the living God, it has been to Israel throughout our wanderings a visible token of the presence of God in our people's midst. Its beauty is the beauty of holiness. Steadfast it has stood as the champion of justice, mercy, and peace.
Its truths are true for all people.
Its
love is a love for all people.
Its God is the God of all people.
As it has been said, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples.
Let all the family of Israel, all who hunger for righteousness, all who seek the eternal, find God here, and here find life. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah,
Amen.
ve'al ma'ad yivarach yiruteh, v'yamlich malchuteh, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל. בעגלה, בעגלה, ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעלמין כל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה, ואמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
God, how can we know you? Where can we find you? You are as close to us as breathing, yet you are farther than the farthermost star. You are as mysterious as the vast solitudes of the night, yet as familiar to us as the light of the sun. To Moses you said, "You cannot see my face, but I will make all my goodness pass before you." Even so does your goodness pass before us, in the realm of nature and in the joys and sorrows of life.
When justice burns within us like a flaming fire,
when love evokes willing sacrifice from us, when to the last full measure of selfless devotion, we demonstrate our belief in the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness, then your goodness enters our lives, and we can begin to change the world. And then you live within our hearts, and we, through righteousness, behold your presence. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. You may be seated. I'm going to chant it in Hebrew. If you want to know what it says in English, you'll have to do that on your own. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם, אמת. It's true. אני, oops, I'm going to do this one in English. Sorry, I started doing that one in Hebrew too. Start me and I can't stop. I, the Eternal One, have called you to righteousness and taken you by the hand and kept you. I have made you a covenant people, a light to the nations.
We are Israel, witness to the covenant between God and God's children.
This is the covenant I make with Israel. I will place my Torah in your midst and write it upon your hearts. I will be your God and you shall be my people.
We are Israel. Our Torah forbids the worship of race or nation, possessions or power.
You who worship gods that cannot save you, hear the words of the Eternal One. I am God, there is none else.
We are Israel. Our prophets proclaimed an exalted vision for the world.
Hate evil and love what is good. Let justice well up as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream.
We are Israel, schooled in the suffering of the oppressed.
You shall not oppress your neighbors nor rob them. You shall not stand idle while your neighbor bleeds.
We are Israel, taught to beat swords into plowshares, commanded to pursue peace.
Violence shall no longer be heard in your land, desolation and destruction within your borders. All your children will be taught of your God, and great shall be the peace of your children.
We are Israel, O God, when we are witnesses to your love and messengers of your truth.
You are my witnesses, says the Eternal One, and my servant whom I have chosen. Know me, therefore, and put your trust in me.
We are Israel, O God, when we proclaim you God our Redeemer, as did our ancestors on the shores of the Red Sea. Ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha neda b'kodesh, norati hilot osef ele, norati hilot osef ele. Ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la.
We continue at the top of 92. May we lie down this night in peace and rise up to life renewed. O God, spread over us your shelter of peace, of quiet and calm, and bless us with rest. And let a time come when morning will bring no word of war or famine or anguish, a time of happiness, of contentment and rest. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukkot shalom. Praised are you, Adonai, because you spread out over us a sukkah of peace. Aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael, on us and on the whole people of Israel. V'al Yerushalayim, Jerusalem especially today, who's in mourning. V'al kol ha'olam, and all of the world, and we are mourning with them. We give thanks for the night and its rest, and the promise of peace for all the world. Vishameru v'nei Yisrael Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורות ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורות ברית עולם. Please rise for the tefillah, which begins on page 93. Adonai sifata tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your glory. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, v'Elohei Rachel, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. In the middle of page 94, God of all generations, of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, of Sarah, Rebekah, Leah, and Rachel, be praised. Your wondrous creative power fills heaven and earth.
God of life and death, be praised. Through us, send help to the falling, healing to the sick, freedom to the captive. Confirm your faithfulness to those who sleep in the dust.
Awesome and holy God, be praised. With acts of love and truth, we hallow your name. As it is said, y'all be holy, for I, your eternal God, am holy.
God of times and seasons, be praised. Enable us through Sabbath rest to explore and learn and impart the meanings of your Torah. Make our hearts ready to serve you this day and all days.
You may be seated. We continue at the top of page 96. God who answers prayer, be praised. May we, your people Israel, be worthy in our deeds and our prayer, wherever we live, wherever we seek you, in this land, in Zion restored, in all lands, you are our God. Source of life and its wonders, be praised. You are the miracle within all we behold. You are goodness, you are compassion. We give thanks to you forever. We read together below the Hebrew. God of peace, of justice, and of love, be praised. Inspire us to banish forever hatred, war, and bloodshed. Help us to establish forever one human family united in peace. God of peace, bless us with peace.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim La'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim La'olam. Ki ata hu melech Adon lekol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech Adon lekol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim La'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim La'olam. V'tov be'enecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'kol et u'v'kol sha'am b'shlomecha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim La'olam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim La'olam. Tasim La'olam. Tasim La'olam.
Take a moment for silent prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, my God, my rock and my redeemer. So we need to count our Omer. We're supposed to do it after sundown, but we've lit the candles, so that means we have to pretend it's after sundown. Shabbat has already begun. As you know, the deal is, in the Torah it says, you shall count off 7 weeks. They must be complete. You must count until the day after the 7th week, 50 days. We're supposed to count 7 weeks and the days, and so we count them in both ways. According to some traditions, if you skip the blessing and the count at night, you forget at night, you can count the next day, but you're not supposed to say a blessing. If you skip more than 1 day, you're not allowed to say a blessing again, according to the tradition, because it says they must be complete. So they think you haven't fulfilled the whole commandment. So what gives you the right to say a commandment blessing? I say, if you're still counting, I really appreciate that you're still counting, and it doesn't hurt to say blessings. I think God appreciates it too, but that's just what God told me. I don't know. The blessing is almost the same as the one we say for lighting candles, but at the end, instead of saying Lahadlik ner shel Shabbat, we say Al Sfirat HaOmer, about counting the Omer. The blessing is, praised are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who makes us holy with commandments, commanded us about counting the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al Sfirat HaOmer. Hayom 34 yom, shehem 4 shavuot v'shisha yamim la'omer. Today is the 34th day, making it 4 weeks and 6 days of the Omer. We're getting there. We're running out of time here before we get to Shavuot. It's so exciting. We're building and building until the moment where we're all standing at Sinai again, and it feels like that, and it's so exciting to build that excitement. Which brings me to one of the points which I started with today, and that is that if you don't know about Lag BaOmer, shame on me. I'm the rabbi. I'm supposed to teach you about that. I'm supposed to teach you about awesome things that are happening in our world. And let me tell you, especially during this pandemic, having things like holy days that occur at specific times is really helpful. I don't know about you, but I feel like this whole year is like a blur. I can't tell. It's as if it kind of didn't happen. There was a meme or a T-shirt or something that came out that said, I'm not counting this year, so I'm not adding candles to my cake, you know. I feel like I didn't get older. I feel like I didn't. It was suspended animation, kind of. And the thing that, I spoke with Spencer Reichman, our soloist for Yom Tov, for the holidays. He came by, who was coming through the other day, and he visited. And he said that he was living with his parents for a while. All of his jobs fell through because he's a singer. And he was living with his parents for a while, and they were kind of totally oblivious to the passage of time. The one thing that kept them going, and I was hoping he was going to say, was watching your services, but that's not what he said. And I'm not saying he didn't do it, but the one thing that kept them connected to time was they knew they had to get the trash out on time. So they called it Erev Trash, the trash evening. They knew they had to get that out. So that's the one thing that they, like big circles on their calendar and things. And the truth is that having moments in time is really very helpful for so many reasons. This year it's been weird because even though we had moments in time, it hasn't been really ways to celebrate together. We need togetherness, and it's been very difficult to do it, even though I am thrilled about the fact that I got to visit with lots of people on Zoom who I would not have gotten to visit with if it weren't for Zoom. I appreciate that, and I'm going to always try to see the bright things about it, but having moments in time that are holy is a really important thing. And if you don't know about something like a Lag BaOmer, which is a fun time, and wouldn't it have been cool if everybody was doing, well, except it was rainy and gray here, bonfires or grilling or something last night because of a fun Jewish thing? Wouldn't it have been fun if you knew to do that? And I'm sorry if you didn't, because that was my fault if you didn't know to do that. And I'm going to keep trying to let you know about fun things like that. The Torah portion, last week told us about holiness things. And the Torah portion this week reminds us of some of the most important holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Shabbat, and the 3 pilgrimage festivals. And it reminds us of that again. And I just want to remind you that it is strange, but helpful to be grounded in time in some way. And we can make it a different way, but it's helpful to be grounded in time. Because in a lot of ways, we've been in a suspended animation. The other time when it feels like this is when we are in mourning, when time seems to stand still because the person we loved is not there. And even with that, the fact that we're allowed to suspend the public mourning for Shabbat is a helpful thing, to have that little bit of a spark
Haadama.